There are moments when one is called upon to sacrifice something dear for a holy cause, and oftentimes they find themselves unwilling or unable to do so without any reserve. Rebbetzins, however, had no such doubts. She was willing to wholeheartedly give up the world of comfort and security in which she'd been raised in order to follow her husband. She had been born into a home that oozed opulence and wealth and was raised in the lack of luxury. Even so, when asked to give away her entire dowry, not to fund yeshivas, a lofty cause, whose value she'd been raised to appreciate, but rather to fund physical labor and penniless farmers to work the land, buy tractors, and make the basics to have food on her table, she not only agreed, but wholeheartedly supported the act. And never once did she doubt what she'd done. Her parents, who disapproved of her husband's atypical ways, pressured Sarah to divorce him, and when she refused, deprived the couple of their most basic needs. They lacked firewood for warmth and light, and often had no food on the table. Once rich and pampered, rebbetzins, along with the Alter Rebbe, now lived a life of abject poverty and privation. Nonetheless, she stood loyally by her husband's side and encouraged him throughout it all. Despite their dismal financial status, she struggled to obtain a horse and buggy so that he would be able to travel and learn. A woman of noble self-sacrifice, she took no notice of self when sacrifice was called for. From the day that they married, she remained a source of comfort, strength, and unending wisdom for the Alter Rebbe. Once, upon the sight of many Hasidim streaming towards their home, her husband fell to the floor with a cry. "What do they want from me? What do they see in me? Who am I that they'd wish to hear from me?" "Why do you think they're traveling to you?" asked rebbetzins. Her voice was laden with wonder. "That's not the case. They've only come here because you've been privileged to hear from the Maggid of Mezrich, and they want you to give over to them what he's given over to you." Hearing this, the Alter Rebbe agreed to fulfill the request of the people outside. He was able to appreciate and greatly respect the message in her words. This was a woman who had sacrificed everything in order to support him, a woman who gave over powerful points in gentle wisdom, but whose character and ardent allegiance remained stalwart and strong. Time and again, she was called on to sacrifice all she ever had, and time and again, she did so without the slightest hint of a doubt.
And now we have rebbetzins daughter of the Alter Rebbe, mother of the Tzemach Tzedek.
More than all we had. Rebbetzin Laura Leah had intense Mesiras Nefesh that we can't even dream of having. She was so focused on what was truly important for the world and the people around her, losing herself and what was important for her self-benefit in the process. How can we reproduce that in a small way? Is it by keeping our emotions in check even when we're frustrated or annoyed? Is it by holding back from saying something nasty, sarcastic, or disrespectful? Let's try to care and focus on improving our surroundings.
Now we have rebbetzin Shana, wife of the Mitzvah Rebbe.
There are many ways to judge a person, and quite a few are based on everything but the person themselves. Instead of determining the value of one's character, it is the value of your credit card we first ascertain. We place their economic status and financial ability on the vital list, relegating the midas to lists of welcome extras. That must have been why a simple Malamed with 5 daughters to marry off and not one dowry to his name turned to his Rebbe in desperation. In an unexpected move, however, the Rebbe responded that he would take one of the man's daughters as a wife for his son Dober, who would later become the Mitzvah Rebbe. Why? Because he saw the value in Shana, recognized the powerful qualities that outshone her family's humble fortune. The Alter Rebbe knew a gem when he saw one, and was able to appreciate the true worth of a girl raised in poverty, but who would lead a life of spiritual wealth and become the second rebbetzin of Chabad Hasidus. Rebbetzin Shana was a powerful woman with an incredibly compelling personality. Her manner was candid and forthright, and her commitment to her husband and Hasidus was unconditional, resolute. Subsequent to the death of her daughter Sarah, Rebbetzin Shana raised her 2 orphaned grandchildren, young Gittel and Rivka. Years later, after the brief marriage of her grandson, the future Rebbe Maharash, ended with the tragic passing of his wife, she turned to her son-in-law, the Tzemach Tzedek, with a request. Please take one of the granddaughters which I raised in my home as a second wife for your son. Eager to draw out the full extent of this obvious treasure, the Tzemach Tzedek chose to appear insurgent. There's a $20,000 dowry being offered from a girl in Liepli. What kind of dowry will we be given here? Eishes chaver kechaver, Rebbetzin Shana replied. The wife of a tzaddik is equal to a tzaddik himself. The wife of a Rebbe. She said, the schus of my 40 years as an Eishes chaver is the dowry I offer. Yes, she had been handpicked from poverty to become an Eishes chaver, and those tremendous sechusim were the greatest thing she had. Still, she relinquished them to marry off a granddaughter who likewise had no dowry. It was an offer that Tzemach Tzedek could never refuse. Yes, there are many ways to measure wealth, yet what could possibly be worth more than a virtuous soul? Although there may be many ways to judge people, could there be a truer one than to view the quality of that individual? What better example of this than Rebbetzin Shana? She had been born into a home of poverty, but was singled out for the richness of her soul. The Alter Rebbe saw in Shana not material wealth, but spiritual splendor, qualities that rendered her worthy enough to become an Eishes chaver. If we were to take one lesson from Rebbetzin Shana's life, let it be to not judge a person by their externals. Let us try to judge people past that and see to who they truly are.
And now rebbetzin Menucha Rachel, daughter of the Mitzvah Rebbe.
Rebbetzin Menucha Rachel was the daughter of the Mitzvah Rebbe and was known for her holiness and brilliance. She moved to Hebron with her family, and before she left, she told the Tzemach Tzedek that she was concerned about the rain and bad weather conditions. The Tzemach Tzedek replied, "So what? Go between the raindrops." And sure enough, not one raindrop fell onto her wagon on her way. In Hebron, Rebbetzin Menucha Rachel was a legend. Many would come to her for brachos on their wedding day or when they were sick. They called her Softa Menucha Rachel, and she was very beloved in the eyes of the people, known for her incredible wisdom and kindness. The Rebbetzin was very careful about cleanliness and purity. The word tahor was always on her mouth, and she herself was the epitome of cleanliness. Not even a tiny stain was found on her clothing. In her last years, despite her age, and despite the fact that she was bedridden, she was outstandingly clean. She also educated her children and grandchildren to be extremely clean, and from time to time when she would meet her family, she would bring this to their attention. She would regularly say, in the name of the Alter Rebbe and her father, the Mittler Rebbe, "In a place where there is purity and cleanliness, there is kashrus and Yiddishkeit." Rebbetzin Menucha Rachel had an incredible impact on her surroundings, moving to a foreign country, yet still giving just as much or even more than before, despite the fact of moving to a new place with a foreign language and culture. She saw what had to be done and did it. How can we walk around with Rebbetzin Menucha Rachel's glasses? How can we try and affect our surroundings to the utmost, even when it seems uncomfortable?
We all have those days when we hold a sitter but eye the clock, and though our eyes may face the page, we see only the load of tasks that must get done. Yes, we know that tefillah ought to be a avodah shebelev, but we find it rather difficult to put in the wholehearted work. Rebbetzin Chaim Moshe, however, teaches us that it is precisely this intense concentration and earnest attention that makes up a worthy prayer. It is not the words we say, but the effort invested. She was raised in the home of her father, the Mittler Rebbe. She was the Alter Rebbe's granddaughter and the Tzemach Tzedek's wife. It was about her that Hasidim would say she rested among miracles, referring to the constant wonders her father would perform. To her, they were so numerous that they ceased to amaze. As she said, "By my father and grandfather, miracles were rolling on the floor. No one had time to pick them up." Supernatural events, she felt, were not what makes a Rebbe. It isn't on miracles that we must focus, rather on their Torah and Chassidus, and on their extraordinary Avodah. It is this remarkable Avodah that renders Rebbeinu, as it did herself, worthy of their rank. Rebbetzin Chaim Moshe was known to spend many hours a day poring over the Tehillim, and despite any inaccuracies or mispronunciations, it was precisely this to which the Tzemach Tzedek attributes his salvation, at one time remarking to his son, "It is your mother's Tehillim that saved me in St. Petersburg while in prison for my work on behalf of the Russian Jews." The Rebbetzin may have mispronounced a word or two, but her prayers were not misdirected. They were accurately aimed and promptly received by God Himself.
Advantage of. Not one word about the inconvenience it had caused. Rather, she was so
Just, you wonder why, if everyone's different, you got stuck with the cheaper half of the deal. The frizzy hair, pimpled face, taste buds that love loads of junk, and a metabolism that can't handle it. Upon her marriage to the Rebbe Rashab, rebbetzin Sharon Sarah came to live in Lubavitch and observed how she was considerably shorter than the average townsfolk. Noticing her discomfort, her father-in-law, the Rebbe Maharash, remarked, "Don't feel down about your height. It is known that shorter trees are ideal for planting fruit and that they yield exceptional produce. In other words, you were created with the exact appearance and particular qualities that you need to achieve success along the road that your individual life has mapped out for you." Often, throughout the years, rebbetzin Sharon Sarah was blessed to see the truth in those words. She was wise and righteous and a steady supporter of Yeshivas Tevchem Tamimim, even establishing an organization for the aid of its students. Once, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Munkatcher Rebbe as he walked with her son, the Rebbe Rayatz, she hid behind a tree along their planned path. Approaching, the Munkatcher Rebbe said, "I feel a spirit of holiness here." To which the Rebbe Rayatz replied, "That is my mother." Yes, this was rebbetzin Sharon Sarah. Though diminutive in size, she had towering abilities and was created, like we all are, with just what we need to fulfill the task that we're set to do and reach the greatest heights. It's so easy to feel less than and taken advantage of, but let's strive to appreciate the unique qualities that we were granted with. Let us try to recognize what we have instead of what we don't have.
No one wants to do those things, those little things, but they must get done, somehow, some way. Who will step up to the plate? Tevchem Tamimim was finally established. There were students, there was a curriculum, there was learning. There was just one thing missing, a secretary. If you've gone to school for long enough, you know that every school needs a good secretary. Someone who has enough band-aids for every bleed, enough staples for every paper, enough answers for every question. Someone who fills in the gaps, who keeps the school together by doing all those little things that no one else wants to do. There was no such secretary in Tevchem Tamimim, so rebbetzin Hamadina became that secretary. She would write receipts for payments and do a lot of other secretarial work, all from her one-room home, which served as her dining room, study, bedroom, and now the yeshiva office. You see, it was all very simple to her. Something has to get done, and I see that it must get done. Therefore, I will do it. No overlooking details, no hesitations, no waiting around for someone else to come along and save the day. rebbetzin Hamadina took a stand when circumstance demanded it. She was a real mensch. When those little things suddenly creep up and beg to be dealt with, it is sometimes first instinct to look away and assume that someone will take care of it sometime. That someone must be you, and that time must be now. Don't wait around for the person who should or is supposed to do it. If you see something that needs to get done, take responsibilities. Roll up your sleeves and do it. When you're in a place where there is no man, be a man. Like rebbetzin Hamadina.
Rebbetzin Chana, mother of our Rebbe.
Rebbetzin Chana, the mother of the Rebbe and wife of Rebbe Yitzchak, had a very rare personality. All those who encountered her were deeply impressed by the seemingly small acts of kindness that she did, and her greatness was no contradiction to her humility and simplicity. Tight shoes, an itchy scarf, or an unpleasant atmosphere, all of these bring thoughts of discomfort. We can all agree that comfort is a pretty good feeling, a reassuring, securing, motivating feeling, whether it's comfort in the shoes we walk in or the environment in which we find ourselves. Of course, Rebbetzin Chana knew exactly what discomfort meant. After all, she had endured years of it, as she exhibited total mesiras nefesh when she stood by her husband Reb Levi Yitzchak's side during his years of imprisonment and exile. Rebbetzin Chana valued comfort. Being near her was as comfortable as being home. But this was not by default. She actively looked for ways to make others feel at ease. A chassid related that whenever he visited Rebbetzin Chana, she was always interested in listening to everything that he was busy with. Every detail. When he became a chassid, Rebbetzin Chana advised his kala as to how to build her home, starting with matters of cooking and ending with matters of holiness. When the couple was blessed with a baby boy, the phone rang in their home. It was Rebbetzin Chana calling to inquire about the new mother's welfare and how the couple was dealing with the baby. Before leaving to Eretz Yisrael, a chassid called Rebbetzin Chana to bid her farewell. "You don't say goodbye over the telephone," Rebbetzin Chana kindly insisted. "Come over to my house." Mrs. Swerdlov's family was very close to the Rebbetzin. One time, the person who stayed with the Rebbetzin in her apartment had a wedding to attend, and Mrs. Swerdlov, then only 11 or 12 years of age, was chosen to stay with Rebbetzin Chana for the night that her attendant was away. Rebbetzin Chana showed her to the room in which she would stay. Mrs. Swerdlov looked around the room. It was immaculate. On the dresser, there was a mirror that showed the back view of the head, as well as hairbrushes, which was all very enticing for an 11-year-old girl. In the middle of the clean, neat dresser stood a crocheted doily with a little round box on it. The little girl curiously picked it up and yanked it to find out what was inside. She yanked. It didn't open. She tried again. Still nothing. Finally, like a soda bottle being opened for the first time after being shaken, the little round box burst open, shooting powder in all directions of the spotless room. Mrs. Swerdlov burst into tears. What had she done? How would she ever clean up the mess? Just then, Rebbetzin Chana knocked at the bedroom door. She walked in, and when the powdery disaster met her eyes, for a split second, she was shocked. But immediately, the look on her face transformed to a smile of understanding as she said, "Ich will gehen bringen zwei Trappeskes, mir wollen das reden," which means, "I'm going to go and get 2 schmattes, and we will clean this up." And then, putting a finger over her mouth, she reassured, "Und mir wollen keiner nicht erzählen," which means, "And we aren't going to tell anyone." Of course she got schmattes, and they cleaned up the room. A lot of people cared. Rebbetzin Chana understood and cared. But she didn't just care. She did something about it. Such was the extent of her care. Although the Rebbe is ordinarily sought out for advice and guidance, many would turn to Rebbetzin Chana when the Rebbe was unavailable, or in order to have her help them sort out and formulate their requests. This wasn't only because the Rebbetzin had good advice and helpful insights, but because she was so comforting. She drew others in, making them feel good and at ease when approaching and interacting with her. When you interact with others, do more than speaking politely. Speak and interact in such a way that others feel good about themselves when they are near you. Just like Rebbetzin Chana.
And finally, Rebbetzin Chaim Mishka, our Rebbetzin.
Rebbetzin Chaim Mishka, the wife of our Rebbe, our Rebbetzin. She was extremely regal and had a sharp sense of humor. She was well thought out in every detail and she was so brilliant you couldn't even call her a genius. She was known to be able to give a kind word to anyone in any situation, but her most striking trait was her extreme humility. The rebbetzin received a silver tray for her lichter from her sister's family, the Horensteins. This tray was from the Tzemach Tzedek, and she never put it under her candles. She said, "How could such a simple person like me be worthy to use something so special?" The rebbetzin greatly respected her ancestry. She used to speak very fondly of the home of her grandfather, the Rebbe Rashab in Lubavitch. And she once said about her father in regard to Yeshivas Tomchei Tmimim in America, "Only a giant like my father could accomplish such a transformation." Rebbetzin Stern Sarah, Rebbetzin Rivka, and Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka all passed away in the month of Shvat. They all asked for a cup of water to make a bracha on and immediately passed away right after. Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka is our Rebbetzin. How can we continue her legacy? Her extreme humility and self-sacrifice, which in today's 21st century are so hard to find. What can I do to emulate her?
Your legacy as fire.